Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Mike Walker. I am the president of the Voluntary Benefit Shop. Welcome today to our Voluntary Benefits webinar series. We do this pretty much every month. In fact, this month we've actually done two of them. So maybe some of you were on the one earlier this month on a different topic. Today we're going to jump into some of the legislative aspects going on with long-term care around the country. I'm sure we'll have a few more people that join us here as we kick it off, but we're going to go ahead and get started so that we can get you guys out of here in time. Chelsea, I'm having a problem with. There we go. Okay. So. Guys, again, my name is Mike Walker. Again, president of the Voluntary Benefit Shop. Some of you are familiar with me. Maybe we have some newcomers on here. Let's go ahead and if you're a newcomer, here's our contact information. Again, at the Voluntary Benefit Shop, all we do is we help consultants such as yourselves bring these life with long-term care solutions to their clients in a way that's very comfortable, engaging, and gets great results. If you want to reach out to us to talk about long-term care, life with long-term care for your clients, here's my contact information. Here's our website. Certainly feel free to reach out. I'll pull all this up at the end again if you want to check us out. I do want to promote an upcoming webinar that we have coming up February 20th at 1 p.m. We have a webinar coming up where we are going to do a comparison and a conversation about all of the carriers that have these life with long-term care options out there. Right now, there's about 4 carriers that really have viable options, but there's going to be a couple more that get added in the marketplace over the next year. So certainly keep your eyes open for that. And again, that will be on February 20th. Okay, so topic at hand for today, we're talking about long-term care legislative updates. Again, just want to make sure everybody knows this is being recorded. Recording will be at our website that you'll be able to access. You also have the ability to ask questions. You can put a question into chat, or we'll pause at the end and allow people to ask questions at the end if they want to unmute, but certainly feel free to enter your questions into chat. Okay, so before we dig into legislative aspects, just something to think of with these life with long-term care hybrid products. And the reason I mentioned life with long-term care is because that's really the way that organizations, employers are really addressing the long-term care need as a benefit in today's world. The standalone long-term care options really have kind of went by the wayside when it comes to being done as an employee benefit, just because there's not really a group product out there for those products currently, but there definitely is on the life with long-term care side. Really fast growing product out there. In 2023, we had about 22% growth in those combination products across the carriers. I think one of the interesting things from the stats on here is look at the want from the employees of this product. 36% of employees wish that their employers offered long-term care. That stat comes from Eastbridge. And look at the generational mix. It's not just us older folk. I'm a Gen Xer. It's not just people like me or the boomers. Gen Z and millennials also, inquire about this product at a high rate. 29% of companies intend to offer long-term care in the future, and 51% of employees say that they would purchase long-term care if their company offered it on a voluntary basis. Now, in terms of 2024 numbers, look at the increase in sales for the carriers. Really, the 3 big carriers that are out there: Allstate, 10% increase in their life with LTC sales. Transamerica, a 50% increase in their life with LTC sales. They had a new product out last year that really, I think, spurred some of that. And then Trustmark with a 15% increase in sales with life with LTC. And I think the majority of those carriers are really anticipating even more sales growth this year. We see tremendous need and tremendous interest in these life with long-term care options. Now, what we're here to talk about today is some of the aspects of what's driving the conversation, and specifically the legislative aspect. So let's just touch on like the things that are driving this conversation at the HR level. And in number one, you have the fact that it's an aging population. It is the most underprepared for financial need in our country. Most people have no idea when it comes to long-term care planning, what that means or what they're preparing for. You have the long-term care payroll tax legislation. That's really our topic for today that we're going to dig into. Really, as I said, there's really no group standalone LTC market out there anymore. So the life with LTC products really drive, or really the focus there, which they come with preferred underwriting, really high levels of guaranteed issue. And then, of course, as more and more organizations do this, more and more organizations want to stay competitive from a benefit package competitiveness standpoint. So those are really the factors that are driving the conversation. And at an employee level, at an individual level, here's a couple of surprising stats. If you're new to these webinars, maybe you haven't seen this, but if you've been on these webinars before, you have seen this. But just quick recap. 70% of us over the age of 65 will need long-term care services. 20% of us will need that care for longer than 5 years. And here's a snapshot of costs. $75,000 is the median annual cost for an in-home health aide, $104,000 for a nursing home, $116,000 for a private room in a nursing home, $367,000 is the estimated cost of care for the final 5 years of life for a person with dementia. So big costs. Doesn't take long for it to really drain a family's financial security, the financial security of the healthy spouse, retirement assets, etc. That's the bad news. The good news is, as consultants, this is what we do, right? We educate people about this potential liability and help them find solutions to mitigate that risk. And that's what we do every day. So without further ado, let's talk about the legislative aspect of this. So before we dig into what's going on with specific states, it's important to understand the driving force behind this. And if you haven't been on one of these webinars before, maybe this is new for you, but what's driving this conversation at the state level is the strain that long-term care costs are placing on states' Medicaid systems. And, what happens is, for most of us in America, is we work for, 20, 30, 40 years. We build up this nest egg for retirement. We retire. We start to utilize that nest egg. At some point in time in the future, we need long-term care services. That erodes our nest egg. And then people end up on Medicaid, okay, for long-term care services. So in any given state, long-term care costs represent somewhere typically between 15% and 40% of a state's total Medicaid spend. Now you can see there's states that are outliers that are on either end of that, but like my state that I live in, Maryland, 24% of the state's total Medicaid spend are long-term care costs, okay? You can see the other, various states that are on here. Delaware's 10%, Pennsylvania's 12%. Florida, where I sit right now, is 11%. But then you have states like West Virginia where it's 30%, and California where it's 22%, New York is 20%. So, pretty much in between that 15 to 40% range. And the reality is that's just a burden that states' Medicaid systems cannot continue to withstand, especially as long-term care costs continue to go up. So what states are trying to figure out is, like, how do they take the pressure off their Medicaid systems? And so the way states are really thinking about doing that, or looking at doing that, is by creating these state-run long-term care plans that are funded via payroll taxes. And so, quick recap, the first state to do something about this a couple of years ago was the state of Washington. They created the nation's first state-run long-term care plan. And the state of Washington, it's funded via a payroll tax on the workers of the state of Washington. And it funds this very minimal lifetime maximum benefit long-term care plan of $36,500. $36,500. So it's a drop in the bucket when it comes to long-term care. So if I'm a worker in the state of Washington, I pay this tax, comes right out of my paycheck every payday. It's a payroll tax, and it funds this minimal plan. Now, what they did do in the state of Washington was they enabled people back in 2021 to be able to opt out of this tax if they had an individual long-term care plan in place. And the Life with Long-Term Care hybrid products counted towards that opt-out. And so the end result was back in 2021, when they did this in the state of Washington, as thousands of organizations scrambled to put a plan in place that would allow their employees to participate and therefore opt out. And we helped a ton of companies do that. And employees enthusiastically wanted to opt out because they wanted to control the dollars. They wanted to cover their spouse. They wanted something that they could take with them no matter where they moved. They wanted, a better benefit. And so many employees did opt out of the tax and get their own private coverage. And that opt out, people had to get coverage in place in the state of Washington by November 1st of 2021, and they had to opt out by the end of 2022. Okay. And I bring that up because yesterday I had a broker that emailed me asking like, hey, can employees still get coverage and opt out in Washington? The answer is no. They had to already opt out. So if I'm a new worker in the state of Washington, I don't have any choice. I have to pay the tax. If I didn't opt out, I'm always paying the taxes the way it stands right now. There's no additional opt-out period, okay? So that's what went down in the state of Washington. Now, ultimately, the governor of the state of Washington did delay the implementation of that tax until July 1st of 2023, but it did start on July 1st of 2023. They didn't fix any of the problems. They didn't allow for any additional opt-out. So if I'm paying the tax in the state of Washington at this point, I'm stuck for the time being paying the tax. Now, I do want to point out something that happened in the state of Washington over the last couple of years. Initially, the program wasn't portable, so people couldn't take it to other states. It is now portable. Okay, that amendment was passed last year. And then another thing, you see the highlighted thing on the bottom here. This happened in the state of Washington, and this is important. So there was a ballot initiative. It's called Ballot Initiative 2024 in the state of Washington that would have amended the CARES Act in Washington that would have made the program voluntary. Well, understand that when a tax is voluntary, essentially it's going to end the program. The program's going to fall by the wayside. But the initiative failed. Maybe surprisingly, maybe not, depending on who you talk to before the vote. But it failed by a 55-45 vote. So the state of Washington residents voted to keep that state-run long-term care and that tax in place. And so it stays as is, okay? Now, there may be some future legislation that may focus on strengthening the program, but as it is now, it stays in place. There's no additional opt-out. People are paying the tax unless they were able to get that exemption before January 1st of 2023. And but I think the big deal with this one is I think it's going to empower other states that have started to look at similar types of legislation to move forward. Now that the state of Washington residents have voted to keep it in place, other states will be empowered to move forward. So let's talk about some other states. So California is probably my bet to be the next state to do something about this. There has not yet been any other states that have passed legislation outside of the state of Washington. There's been many other states to start to look at it. California is probably farthest down the road. They created a task force. They have five proposed plan designs, and those plan designs went through an actuarial study. Here's a snapshot of what those 5 proposed plans that went through actuarial study look like. And you can see that they range from being very minimal, like the state of Washington, to being much more robust here at the Design 5. Much more robust. And, there's a lot of different aspects. I'm not going to go through all these different details with you. This is like a whole different webinar if you want to dig into the plan designs in the state of California. But what I do want to point out is how much effort, time, and how pragmatic they were about this study. They looked at many different plan design structures. You can see this range from supportive benefits to higher range comprehensive benefits. They looked at different features in terms of whether or not it was going to be portable, meaning people could take it to other states. Whether or not it was what the vesting periods were, when benefits would be available and things of that nature. So they looked at a lot of different options, including different financing options. So you can see down here where it talks about, whether or not there's a contribution cap. So in the state of Washington, there's no contribution cap. The more money I make, the longer I work, the more I pay into it. And you can look in the state of California, some of the plan designs had a contribution cap. Some of them didn't have a contribution set cap. Some of them had lower income people not contributing. Some had all employees contributing. And some had employer and employee contributions to the tax. So a lot of different options in California. And they went with, opt out, whether or not there's going to be opt outs, whether or not there was coordination of benefits. And then here's the proposed estimated tax rates in the state of California for the different plans. So all of these tax rates are higher than what's in place in the state of Washington. The state of Washington is 0.58. Okay. You can see that in California, it ranges from 0.6 to 3, and there's both employer and employee components to some of these. And but when you really dig into the fine print and the alternate scenarios, it says that the tax rate probably needs to be higher than this to really properly fund the program in the state of California too. So when they do pass something in the state of California, it may very well have a higher tax rate than this. Okay, who knows? The point I wanted to make is that if California put a lot of time into this. And it actually, the committee that did this is actually no longer in place. And nothing happened last year because last year was an election year, right? So it's very likely that it gets repicked up this year. The actuarial study has been delivered to the governor, to the legislator, to the insurance commissioner. It's very likely that somebody else picks up the baton, continues to run with this. They put a lot of time and effort and expense into this. I don't think it's just going to fall by the wayside. They have certainly have the type of political climate where this could very well be passed. So my opinion is that the state of California will be the next state to do something about this. And so if I had clients in the state of California, this is something that I would really want to try to get ahead of them with. I would want to have this conversation about LTC, life with LTC as a benefit. Let's touch on some other states. So Colorado, not a lot happened in there. Back in 2023, they heard presentations from WACARES, from Oliver Wyman, who was the consultant that helped California. Positive reaction from the commission. There hasn't been any next steps there, but certainly a conversation that's been had. Connecticut, okay? Connecticut, they had a bill introduced that would require the Department of Insurance to conduct a study on a state-run long-term care plan. The study was then presented to the General Assembly on July 1st of last year, and then more legislation was introduced to have a further study done on like how they would fund it, basically, right? And so that's kind of where they are in Connecticut right now. Connecticut also is a state that does have the type of political climate that very well something could happen. I wouldn't say that, it's going to be as soon as California. They're not nearly as far down the road, but I would keep an eye on Connecticut. Now, Hawaii, they had a bill that was passed, H2224, that required the creation of a long-term care plan to achieve policy goals to ensure the availability of long-term care services. Okay. They've had funding put aside to hire somebody for a planning position in the Executive Office on Aging. I think that position has now been filled, and they're working on their master plan, right, to how to fund the state's LTC policy goals. Now, this one, there's some cultural things that tie in here, because in the state of Hawaii, if you know anything about their culture, it's very much about caring for your elders, right? And making sure that your elders are cared for. So this is another state that I think something's very likely to happen with, just because of, culturally, it's something that they really want to make sure that, elders are cared for. So keep your eye on that one. Kentucky, this one kind of popped out last year out of nowhere. They had a joint resolution that was introduced by directing the Department of Insurance to create a task force to explore the feasibility of implementing a statewide insurance program for long-term care services. Code word for creating a tax to fund a state-run long-term care plan. So that task force, I think, is just getting started. So we're not really that far down the road there in Kentucky. But has, again, the conversation has started. My state that I live in, Maryland, they actually had a bill that was introduced last year that would require the Department of Aging to contract with an independent consultant to conduct a study. Okay, that study was supposed to be due by the end of this year. However, the Department of Aging pushed back and said they did not have the resources to undertake this right now. And ultimately, the bill was withdrawn by the legislative sponsor. So there's nothing imminent in the state of Maryland. There's nothing going on in the state of Maryland. However, the fact that the conversation has started, I think is, noteworthy. And again, the political climate in Maryland is such that this could be something that, gets pushed to the forefront in the state of Maryland sometime over the next couple of years. So certainly, something for us to keep our eye on. Massachusetts, they did create an LTC study commission mirroring California. Funds were appropriated to complete a study, but ultimately the bill didn't pass. Okay, so that study was not undertaken. Now, since then, the Massachusetts Department of Health and Human Services kicked off its own long-term care feasibility study, and that study is going to evaluate public and private options, mandates versus incentives, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a study going on in the state of Massachusetts, and again, that's one where maybe the political climate would lend itself to this being something that happens sooner rather than later. Certainly the conversation is happening in the state of Massachusetts. Minnesota's another one with some recent activity. Now, their political makeup there shifted a little bit. It was one that was primarily, democratically controlled. That's now not the case in the Senate there. So not as likely maybe to have as much power behind it or support behind it. They did have a legislative task force on aging that released a draft report in October. The next step is to get some public testimony from stakeholders before a final report and recommendations are released. So I would keep my eyes open for a report, later this year from the state of Minnesota. New York. Now, this is another one that's had some momentum over the years, and it got kind of quiet last year, although there was a bill introduced. So there's a senator there named Senator Shelley Mayer, pretty prominent. She's done a lot to bring resources for education and things of that throughout the state of New York. So she's pretty popular in the state of New York. Pretty well known, and she has introduced the Long-Term Care Trust Act, and then there was a companion bill that was also introduced last year, and it would act the New York Long-Term Care Act. Okay, now it hasn't been voted on. I don't even think last year it really got into serious conversation. Again, election year, so a lot of things got put on hold. I would expect this to be re-brought up this year when session starts, because it has been a hot topic in California, or I'm sorry, in New York. So that's another state where if I had clients, and we do a ton of business with groups that have people in New York and California, but if I had clients that have employees in New York, I would want to get ahead of the conversation there as well. Pennsylvania is one that is a little interesting because they've introduced legislation twice now, 2022 and 2023. Nothing happened last year. But each time they introduced legislation, the legislation was almost identical to what was passed in the state of Washington. Warts and all, right? So it's almost like they just copied it and proposed it. It has never been to a vote in the state of Pennsylvania. And with the political makeup in Pennsylvania, I don't know, whether it would pass or not. It's not, but Pennsylvania is a little more of a split state, I guess, in some regards. So I don't think that it would get passed in Pennsylvania, or it would definitely not pass as easily as some of the other states. So, but it has been a bill that's been proposed a couple of times, has not yet been to a vote. We'll see if it picks up steam this year. Like I said, last year, nothing really happened with it. So curious to see what happens there this year. Now we'll pause for questions here in just a couple of minutes, but before I do, there's a couple of things happening at the federal level that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of. So there's the WISH Act, okay, and the WISH Act was originally introduced in 2021. Congressman Tom Sosa of New York, Democrat from New York, plans to reintroduce the WISH Act, which stands for Well-Being Insurance for Seniors to Be at Home. That's the WISH Act. He plans to reintroduce it this year. And basically, this targets benefits to those with disabilities that are paid for by a payroll tax that's split equally between employees and employers. Long-term care benefits are then available to applicants who are retired, have paid benefits for at least 6 quarters, cannot perform 2 or more activities of daily living, or have severe cognitive impairment, and expected to be disabled for at least a year. And they'll have a waiting period after the disability begins until benefits would be paid. Now, the waiting period would be based on income. Okay, so I think the lower the income, the shorter the waiting period, essentially. And the long-term care benefit would be a cash amount equal to the median cost of 6 hours per day, or $3,600 per month. This is really unlikely to pass, even when it's reintroduced, particularly with the current political climate. But it is a conversation that's happening. It's been introduced once before, and they plan to reintroduce it again this year. Another thing at the federal level is the Long-Term Care Insurance Act. Representative Eric Burleson, Republican from Missouri, has introduced this plan to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide an above-the-line deduction for long-term care insurance and to reduce certain tax credits. So as many of you know, that people can take, in many instances, can take a tax credit when they buy long-term care insurance. This would actually make the purchase of long-term care insurance an above-the-line deduction, which is advantageous for many reasons. And it's really part of what's called the Long-Term Care Insurance Accessibility Act, I think. But this has, I don't know whether this has a chance to pass, but it has a better chance to pass than the previous act that we looked at. This does have some momentum, but this has been talked about a lot over the last 20 years. So we'll see if this happens. But again, it is a conversation that's happening at the federal level for sure. So with that, let's see, we're at 128. Let me just pause and see. Does anyone have any questions for us so far? Any questions at all? Chelsea, do we have any questions in chat?
We do not.
Guys, I'll pause again just to see. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Okay, so guys, again, what we specialize in are these life with long-term care hybrid solutions. They're benefits that, pay both a life insurance benefit and a long-term care benefit. They're very, very popular. The broker partners that we work with routinely earn about $500 per participant in these products. So you have a group that has 10 participants, that's going to be about $5,000 in commission. If they have, over the groups that we work with, if you get 1,000 people that buy this, that's going to generate about $500,000 in commission. So it can be very lucrative. We typically get anywhere from 20 to 40% participation from an employee group. I'll show you just a couple of quick case studies here. This is a technology firm, 650 people. We generated about $212,000 in premium and $84,000 in comp to our broker partner. Here's a 400-person financial services firm, 75 enrolled for $220,000 in premium and $88,000 in comp to our broker partner. And, even blue collar trucking company, 104 enrolled, $171,000 in premium, $68,000 in comp to the broker partner. And even smaller groups, a 90-person private school, 27 enrolled, $48,000 in premium and $19,000 in comp to our broker partner. So we handle the whole aspect. I'm not going to go through all those details with you today, but we handle all aspects of it. If you're interested in talking about this for some of your clients, certainly feel free to reach out to us. Here's my contact information. You can see here, or go to our website as well. And I will just pause for a second to see if there are any questions at all that we can help answer, and to promote our upcoming webinar on February 20th, which is a comparison of all the available life with long-term care products. Does anyone have any questions for me on what we covered today? Anyone at all? Legislative questions? Anyone? Okay, you guys are a quiet group today, but I do appreciate your attendance. Thanks so much. Chelsea, just to confirm, we don't have anything in chat?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, everyone. I do appreciate it. Here's my contact info again if you wish to reach out and talk about, putting a program in place for your agency to offer these types of programs. We help agencies really build out the marketing for this and create a nice pipeline of cases that we help them execute on. Certainly reach out to us if you're interested in doing that, or if you just have a couple of specific clients that you'd like to talk about. We are here to help. Thank you so much for your time today.